My name is Kelly Chambly, and I'm going to be interviewing you today on the behalf of Greater Lehigh Valley's Writers group for our upcoming The Right Stuff Writers Conference. Thank you so much for joining us, by the
Oh,
way.
absolutely.
I guess we'll start off with, J.D. Barker, what is your genre? What do you write?
I'm kind of across the board. I bounce back and forth between thriller and horror for the most part, much to the chagrin of my agent. Because one of the things that they love to do in this industry, the second you write a book, you send it off to an agent and they immediately want to label you as something. So that they know how to sell you to the editors, and then the editor at the publisher is able to walk into the marketing department and say that, well, this person writes so and so or this type of book, and I just never wanted to write like the same book over and over again. And I've got so many friends in this industry that are kind of stuck in that. It's almost like Groundhog Day. Because the readers expect a certain type of book from them every single time, and like they're just rehashing the same story. And I didn't want to do that, so I purposely bounced back and forth. My first one was horror, the second one was thriller, the next one was horror, and I continue to do that.
That affect book sales?
It does, and that's kind of where it all stemmed from. Because it goes up that chain, just like I said. So the agent has to explain to the editor, what you write. That editor has to go to the marketing people and explain what you write, and then the marketing people have to go out to the bookstores and explain what you write, so that they know where to put you in the store. I think that's where it really came from. Is like bookstores themselves. They've got a thriller section, they've got a romance section, they've got a Western section, they've got these different things, but in today's world, we've got Amazon, we've got Barnes and Noble, we've got all these other, it's a totally different venue, so it's not necessary anymore. But the traditional publishing world tends to be like a big cruise ship in a harbor, and they turn very, very slow, adjusting to change. So they still tend to do this. Now, it does impact sales to a certain extent. I reached out to a bunch of authors. When I first started writing, and I've been very lucky. I know a lot of the big name guys. And Dean Koontz told me straight off the bat, he said that if you're going to do that, if you want to bounce back and forth between genres, you have to do it book by book. You can't write 4 or 5 books in one and then go to another, because that's the readers are gonna kind of stall, and you're gonna lose them. And James Patterson, who I write with, he brought up the exact same thing. And a lot of people don't realize this, but his very first book that he wrote, it was called The Thomas Berryman Number. It tanked. It didn't even go anywhere. Nobody even knows that book. Like he probably owns the only copy of it. But his second one was Along Came a Spider, a serial killer thriller, very defined model at this point. And then he wrote, 4 or 5 other ones right after that with that same formula, even using the same, nursery rhyme type titles for each one. And then on his 5th book, he wrote a book about a girl with wings, called When the Wind Blows. It's science fiction, more or less, not this. And it completely threw his readers. They didn't know what to expect. So he had told me that happened to him, and he basically backed up what Koontz had said. He said, if I would have started from the get-go writing in various genres, the readers would tend to come along, because they latch onto the author's voice more than they do the actual type of story. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do.
My next question, what's one piece of advice that you would give writers that it's not really talked about, something that has helped you along the way?
I think the biggest issue that I see now, because I still mentor a lot of writing students. I missed being a book doctor, so after I started publishing my own books, I kind of got back into the helping other people out. And I see a lot of the same problems, over and over again. And one of the issues that tends to come up quite a bit is authors will come to me and they'll say, well, if this book isn't good enough to get an agent or a publisher, I'm going to go ahead and just self-publish it. And that, from my standpoint, is a big no-no. Like it shouldn't, indie publishing and traditional, like it's not an either or. Like I think the book has to be good enough to go to any one of them. So if you're going to self-publish a book, I don't think you should do that on your own, unless it's good enough for the traditional publishers to want it, and you just decide not to give it to them for whatever reason, whether it's monetary or whatever your thought process is. I tend to discourage people from just throwing stuff out there and into the world, because what ends up happening, if somebody writes a book and it gets turned down by all these people, there's a reason it's getting turned down. There's something wrong there. And these are people that know the industry. They know what sells. They know what, readers are buying. You need to listen to these voices, but a lot of people tend to turn an ear to them and not. But what ends up happening is these, writers will go ahead and put this book out. They'll put it up on Amazon, and they'll get 4 or 5 glowing reviews from their friends and family, and then all of a sudden a real reader, somebody who doesn't know who they are, will find it and kind of call them out for what it really is. They'll, this book is full of typos, it needs an editor, it needs this, it needs that, the story's not, it's half baked, it's 80% developed, like all these things. And you'll get 20, 30, 50, 100 reviews like that. So before you know it, that book's got a 2.5-star rating on the various websites. And honestly, your career is kind of over at that point, because that is who you are to the rest of the publishing world. So, if you write a second book and you take that out to agents, an agent, the first thing they're going to do is look you up online. And if they see, that you've got other books out there and the sales have been poor and the ratings are poor, that's who you are to them. So at that point, in their mind, you're done. Like, they can't take, a product that wasn't able to sell in the first place to a publisher. It's too late. So I see a lot of people do that. It's such a huge mistake, because you're burning all these bridges. So I tend to tell people to make sure that book is 100% perfect before it leaves their desk. Before it goes to an agent, before you self-publish, before you do anything with it, make sure it's gone through professional edits. Make sure you've got a good cover. Make sure it's been professionally formatted. What that ends up doing is, if you eliminate all these problems by hiring the correct people to help you fine tune your book, your agent, you're going to have you're going to have a lot less trouble, let's say, getting an agent, because they're going to see that it's a valuable product there. And that agent's going to have a lot easier time selling that book. Because editors in today's world, they've got, they used to be able to take on a project. If you go back 20 years ago, if they saw a book that they thought might be good, they'd be willing to take it on and work with the author. Today's world, they've got a stack on their desk this big. They don't have time for it anymore. So if your agent is bringing them a book that's perfect or is close to it, where they don't have to put a whole lot of work behind it, they're going to grab that right up, because it's not going to take a lot of their time. They know that it's not going to take a lot of the publisher's time. They're not going to have to hire people to bring it in, and they'll pay top dollar for that, because they don't have to spend that money elsewhere. That's what you really want to shoot for.
So we talked a little bit about the horror. What subjects are you going to be speaking about at the conference?
I'm an open book. I've been in this industry for a really long time. I'm going to kind of go into my history and how I started off. I worked as a book doctor and a ghostwriter for 20 some years, helping other people get published during that time. And that's kind of where I learned to write. Because I was not only working with those authors, but with agents and editors, fine tuning these projects. I ended up with 6 different books that hit the New York Times bestseller list, all with other people's names on the covers. By the time I finished this, when that 6th one hit, my wife and I decided that it was time for me to try and make a go at it of my own and quit hiding behind other people. So that's kind of where my first novel came from. So I'm going to go into that. I've got a lot of friends in the industry. I've picked everybody's brains. So I'm an open book when it comes to the everything related to this industry. I want to help everybody out as much as I can.
That's amazing. I really look forward to hearing from a professional about and behind the scenes, so to speak. What I guess I can ask, what's your least favorite thing about writing? I know it's like blasphemous. Like your least favorite thing.
That's tough, because this is one of those things I was doing for free long before people started paying me to do it. It's it's cathartic for me. It's something that I enjoy. So I think I like every aspect of it. My favorite part is just literally just sitting down at the keyboard and just making up the story, or just typing, not documenting the story. I guess my least favorite part is going back and cleaning that up, the actual editing process. And I think when other people get involved, that's where it takes some of the fun out of it. When you've got an agent that's weighing in it, or an editor, or multiple editors, or, in my case, I write with James Patterson. So, we're trading pages off, and he's calling me and telling me what's wrong with mine. And I'm, trying to tell him what, I feel needs to be changed in his. Like, when you've got multiple cooks in the kitchen, that gets a little tricky. But you have to, in this world, you have to have a tough skin, and you have to be willing to take in all that information and somehow turn it into a positive and use it to help develop your own skill set. So I like to think that's what I'm doing there.
What's your your inspiration. Where does your inspiration come from?
Or where do the stories come from?
Yes.
I have no idea. Yeah, I've got a notepad document. You know, it literally started as a notepad next to my bed that I like used to just carry around with me. Now it's an app on my phone. But I tend to write down absolutely everything. And I tell everybody to do that too, because you'll wake up at like 3 o'clock in the morning with an idea for something, and you'll tell yourself, "Oh, I'll remember that in the morning," and you're never going to remember it in the morning. So always write it down, whether it seems stupid or it seems crazy or whatever. One of the things that I tend to notice is, you know, I've got a laundry list of book ideas, but it's when like multiple ones come together, that seems to be when the story, you know, really gels. You know, when you take this idea and this idea, two things that seem like they shouldn't belong together at all, like peanut butter and chocolate. You know, all of a sudden you put them together and you've got gold, you've got something. That's when it really works. So, you know, it's I think important to write all these different things down. But you know, as far as where the ideas come from, you know, it's all over the place, and I'll go into that a little bit during the classes when we you know, sit down and break this down. But like, you know, I've had if I sit down and say, okay, now it's time to generate an idea, it's never going to happen. These things always come to you when you're walking the dog, when you're out for a run, when you're standing in line at the grocery store, when you're pumping gas in the shower, whatever. It's always when your brain is busy doing something else, and this idea just kind of smacks you upside the head, and you gotta write it down.
Thank you so much for joining us. Again, I can't wait to hear you speak at the conference. It's been
Absolutely.
wonderful.
We're gonna have a lot of fun.